It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah, it has.
Yes.
But it's good being back. It's been a couple of weeks. I wound up kicking Gareth home after we had leveled pretty much every pub in the town. But it was really great. I have no recollection of that episode, by the way. I have some vague memories of stuff that might have happened around that time.
But that's cool. That just means that we both had our little episodes on an episode. So season 2 has been an all give and take kind of affair.
Yeah, we've had those cliffhangers where both of us, one by one, was so shit-faced that we didn't actually know whether we were going to be able to cope with working with the other guy. So,
bad boys of podcasting. Anyway, speaking of shit-faced, I was at a festival all weekend this last weekend, and I'm currently on vacation. So, I've been restituting, but on this auspicious occasion of us reconvening after several weeks of absence, I am now on cheap cola.
I haven't learned a single fucking thing.
That's okay.
I'm on Tuborg FF for life.
Yo! And Gareth seemed to like those as well.
He was very much into them. He actually drank his faster than I did.
Well, he is British.
We did have a shitload of beer, and what happened was that after we did the episode, I walked him back to the hotel he was staying at, and there was a pub right next to his hotel. So we just kind of, at this point the clock is like, I don't know, 1 a.m. or something, and I know I have to get to work on Monday afterwards, but I'd made a deal with my boss that I would show up a few hours late because I had a guest staying. We stand in front of this pub at like 1 a.m. and look at each other and go, pint? A big fucking mistake, by the way. But he was absolutely great having around, I must say. I don't think the episode that we did really showed the true potential of what the guy knows, but it was brilliant having him around, and I hope I get a chance to hang out with him again. That really must be said.
And me too, in person this time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I have plans with you. My holidays are still a couple of weeks away, but I'm sure we can work something out.
I just like how you just casually say, I have plans with you. Not I have plans for you. Not I have made plans for you or with you. I have plans with you.
Plans with you. Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. I'm not aware of these plans as of yet.
Plans with plans with the physical body that is part of you.
This is going to be one of those Saw escape the room kind of deals, isn't it? I mean, you will slowly fill the room with poisonous gas and then put keys inside a dead body strewn around the room, and maybe I'm just
with an emphasis on the room. What a story, Mark.
Oh god. Maybe we should just roll the credits on or title, whatever. Fuck it. Let's skip the episode entirely. Roll credits instead now.
No more for today. No, let's start with the intro. Let's do this properly. Intro.
Let's do the
3, 4, bang, boom.
What can I do for you, doll?
Boom! Boom! Back.
We have returners. Yes, I am going to speak only English for the rest of the episode. Why am I doing that in a Russian accent? Oh god. All right.
Oh god.
Oh hey, and we are now joined on the IRC channel by two esteemed gentlemen. We have our friend Mike.
And we have Billy Bob, who is Joe from
Mastroianni.
Mastroianni.
Yes, which sounds a bit like a cheese, don't you think? I'm not sure how he feels about that.
Well, I would say that it reminds me more of, when I hear his name, Mastroianni, I've instantly got, Godfather theme playing in my skull. So,
well, he's an Italian Canadian apparently. I had no idea, and he speaks French, so he's maybe a multi.
He gets around. Leave the gun. Take the Mastroianni.
Anyway, hi everyone on the IRC channel. Glad you could join us for this fantastic episode.
Today I'm getting the feeling that it's going to be kind of placid today because we're kind of both out of it. You've been vacationing and you've been music festivaling and heavy metaling, and I'm
I went from one extreme to the other. I mean, I started out at a metal festival this weekend, got absolutely blitzed and headbanged a lot, and then I come home. and then I play Gone Home, which is like a completely different. And I'm still kind of in a completely different space in my mind.
I've made a note of playing that. I haven't actually played it, but I've made a note of it because when we did Serena, people were mostly favorably comparing it with Gone Home. And I think, well, that's interesting because if they kind of tried to reach some of the same moods that we went for, then, let me be self-flattering here. It's bound to be good.
Well, I was very happy working on Serena because it does kind of explorative mood. Is that even a word? Explorative, explorative, exploitative. But anyway, you're not actually solving puzzles. You're walking around picking up someone's pieces and putting them together. But I mean, if you haven't played Gone Home and you're going to, despite our despite our personas on these podcasts, we're actually rather mature and sensitive people, so I would keep a box of tissues ready.
Yeah, I have tissues ready, but that's entirely for other reasons.
You will need them for other reasons
to that.
too.
You're placid because you've been headbanging and drinking and playing Gone Home, and I'm slightly placid because if you hear me sniffing, it's not because I've developed a coke addiction. I do have an alcohol problem, different story, but I'm sniffing my ass off these days because I'm allergic to grass, and this is the season for that. So
not that grass.
No, not that kind of grass. I'm not allergic to that. But basically, June tends to be living hell for me, and this has been off to a decent start so far. I've actually been worse than this. This is more like purgatory. But
have you ever looked like the melting head from Raiders of the Lost Ark?
That's a normal summer for me. But bear in mind that you might hear me sniffing and sneezing. I've been on pills for this since fucking March. I've been taking pills since March, and that only takes the top off. I'm still I'm suffering here. I'm bleeding my heart out for the art, man.
Not as much bleeding as in producing phlegm, but anyway, it's good to know that you're in good spirits despite your body breaking down around you.
Yeah, but this is not about my phlegm. It's not about heavy metal music, and it's not about Gone Home. Today we're going to talk about...
No, wait, that joke's still old.
We're actually going to talk about...
You set me up so well, and then you just took it away from me. Yeah,
I get to win that game, man.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about something that is vaguely related to ethics. We're going to talk about crowdfunding.
Yes,
let me preamble a bit by saying that...
Pre-ramble?
Yeah, pre-ramble by saying that this was something that seemed to enter our collective mind sphere as a viable subject, because you had a discussion on Twitter with a couple of friends of ours, namely Gareth and Jess Morissette, Decaf Jedi, and you were talking about the Shenmue 3, I think, isn't it 3 Kickstarter, which is it's kind of unique, and it might also show a tendency that game development is gravitating towards, which is that it's actually a game that is partly crowdfunded, as far as I understand, and then it's actually got Sony behind it as well. So what you've got is a venue that has up until now mainly been used for funding of indies, to AAA studios actually seeing it as a viable platform in which they can
all right,
fund their projects.
Two things. First of all, let's go full disclosure on this. We have been involved in crowdfunding campaigns before. I'm actually wearing the shirt for the two guys from Andromeda Space Venture. We were both heavily involved in that, and so were.
I can turn around my computer here. I don't know if you can see the little box there next to the turntable.
What, the sound card?
It's not a sound card. It's actually a fully equipped amplifier. It's a full stereo. It's called PS Audio Sprout, and this thing was also crowdfunded. My stereo is crowdfunded.
All right, but we are talking games, and
well, mainly. But that was actually. This is slightly relevant to the discussion we're probably going to enter.
But I didn't even finish.
Not a game,
I hardly didn't even get started.
No, well, get started. By all means, get started.
All right. The first thing I was going to say was full disclosure. We've been very involved in crowdfunding campaigns for games, and we have Space Venture was one of them, and we're good friends with a lot of people who do crowdfund their games. IQ Adventures. Hi, Stephen Alexander. We'll get to you in a second.
And I don't know about you. I'm still disappointed with the case of Charles Dexter Ward by Agustin Cortes and his lovely cohorts at Senscape not being
also crowdfund a lot and have been successful in the past, and then somehow managed to screw the pooch with the HP Lovecraft thing, although not of any of their own fault, as far as I can tell. That campaign was perfectly put together, but
it was perfect. And since reading the story, I've been more disappointed, because it would be a pretty fucking great adventure game. I'm reading through all of Lovecraft's stories at the moment, and the case of Charles Dexter Ward is in itself the perfect pitch for an adventure game. It would have been awesome, and I'm really bummed it didn't happen.
So, my point of that being that we're not fundamentally opposed to crowdfunding at all. In fact, no, not at all. There's a Danish crowdfunding association that I'm actually involved with. I go to some of their, crowdfunding pitch meetings, and I set shit up for them, and we did their website, and all of this shit. So we're fundamentally pro crowdfunding. Of course, we want indie games. We wanted adventure games, and then Tim Schafer came along and kind of displayed that as a viable means of acquiring funds for stuff that publishers at that point back in 2011 did not want to touch.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a huge, you know me, and this goes for both of us, so it's not exactly a secret, but both of us are kind of leftists as far as politics goes, but I'm a huge fan of people voting with their wallets, and I think crowdfunding is kind of the zenith of that. It's kind of you cannot go further. It's the apex of people voting with their wallets, and I think that's beautiful in a sense.
Yeah, I do. It's one of those the crowd speaks. Of course, it's called crowdfunding. The crowd votes. This is a good idea. We don't need you gatekeepers telling us what we should and should not play.
It's kind of, it's interesting, because in one sense it reeks free market. It's the ultimate manifestation of the free market. But at the same time, what I've noticed is that around crowdfunding projects, you get a very strong sense of community. I mean, people will. What did we have during Space Venture? We had the Xenon Special Forces, I believe that was called, where people would add, a certain amount of cents to their pledge to become a member of this not so exclusive but still really fucking cool club.
Yeah.
You could say, I did this in support of this game, and that gives me the right to bear this mantle. It's kind of an interesting thing that happens.
But it's not, like you say, it's not just a free market. It's a free market where everyone has a voice, which goes very well in hand with, the explosion of social media, where we are, as a community. It's the same thing that happened with publications and newspapers and stuff. Once the internet was invented and blogs became a thing, all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, the gatekeepers are no longer fully in control. Someone can actually just sit down and type out whatever the fuck they want, and it becomes public. Whether or not it's factually correct or not, of course, that's a completely different discussion, but and not the one we're having right now. But so we are very, very pro crowdfunding.
Definitely.
And my contentious issue that I raised on Twitter, which apparently did not go over so well with Mr. Millward and Mr. Morissette, which is understandable because I probably didn't explain myself too well, is that this Shenmue 3 thing was, and please correct me if I'm wrong on some of the details, because honestly I have not read up as much on it as I probably should. I have no idea.
I don't think I would know. I love the fact that we're about to discuss something that we know absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, but it's more of a philosophical discussion, or perhaps it's more a discussion of ideals and.
It's a discussion about ideology, and it's a discussion about principles. So I think we'll get away with it. Those of you listening to this or watching this may be able to correct us, but it's not about the minutia. It's about the general overview of this whole situation.
Thank you, my friend. That was a wonderful disclaimer that needed to be said.
Because I love this brew.
Because not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but I do kind of appreciate the kind of punk rock spirit that these podcasts have, and not just in the podcast, but also kind of in general. And I think there's a very punk rock kind of spirit around crowdfunding as well, because it's not just about the man in fancy suits who's going to tell you that this is good and you should enjoy this. Let's put it on TV and in a commercial and stuff. crowdfunding has a real punk rock spirit. And what I think the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter took away from that was, as in took away, as in removed from it, was that it was announced big at E3. It's got Sony, like a mega corporation, backing it, and they're basically, in my view at least, cynically using crowdfunding as a way to drum up the community spirit that you were talking about before. They don't actually need the money that they're scraping in. This is just a commercial ploy on their part, and of course it brings in extra revenue, free revenue, and the problem with that is, so far I know there's no problem. Why wouldn't you use any commercial avenue that you could? The problem with that is because they have so much traction and they have so much, they can put on a fancy show at E3 and they can put out. It's basically just market research, and they're burying all these fancy, fantastic projects that are coming out of indie developers who don't have that kind of traction, who can't get an article in Polygon unless they have actually been funded, because Polygon and Kotaku and all the Rock Paper Shotgun won't write about crowdfunding projects that haven't gone through the mill, but they'll write about Shenmue, because it's not only is it a game that everybody wanted, it was announced at E3 and they're crowdfunding this shit. What the motherfuck is going on?
It's not that I disagree, but again, I think I would actually I don't explicitly disagree with anything you say, because what you're saying right now is extremely clever, and I think you certainly do have a point. But I'm not being so dark about it as you are. I think it's entirely the prerogative of any studio to throw something on Kickstarter and see if it'll stick, and if we're really lucky, then it might change the gaming climate. If there is one thing that the men in the suits will understand, then it's certainly money. And if you do put it through their skulls that shit, in the year of 2015, people are still willing to pay up front for an adventure game, which hasn't been, adventure games are doing fine today. It's not a dead genre by any means, but it's not the mainstream genre that it used to be. You have games with adventure elements in them, certainly, even AAA games, but it's not doing as well as it did in like the 90s. So I think that if you're somehow able to use crowdfunding as a platform to hold an influence on the world of AAA gaming, which is usually viewed as a somewhat cynical place to be, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. But I do agree with the philosophical points of what you're saying, and I'll say that maybe I don't think it's a bad thing now, but is this just the beginning? It might just be the beginning. Maybe it'll escalate. Maybe we'll get to a point where every bland AAA project gets its beginnings on Kickstarter. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. You brought up punk rock spirit, and I think Kickstarter is great for that. Kickstarter is a great fucking megaphone for people who want something different.
Exactly, and Shadow was it's a game that many people wanted. Of course, the game stopped around the first sequel, I guess, and then disappeared because the Dreamcast completely shit its pants. So it's a game that a lot of people have been looking forward to for a very, very long time. Yeah. Fine. It's apparently a Kickstarter that the designer himself started, and is using that as sort of a bargaining chip with Sony to see if they'll fund the rest of the game. Fine. I'm still, and I also see your point, which is very good. Thank you. Now that we're greasing each other up, it's a very good point that if customers and if the gaming public actually will have some sort of influence on the sort of AAA shit that gets put out there through a crowdfunding campaign, then that's a good thing. What's not good about it is, of course, that once AAA companies start realizing that they can use crowdfunding campaigns as sort of a instead of focus groups and instead of play testing and marketing stuff and all of this stuff, they can just use that to drum up attention. Because let's face it, AAA games have already had a bunch of forums where you can comment on what you think the game should contain and what it shouldn't, because these days games get released half finished and the rest of the game is all DLC. Yes. They've already had tons of this stuff, and when's the last time they've really listen to what the the customer base has to say. So why should they listen now that you're on a crowdfunding platform?
That's a good point, actually. I can think of one example where a studio had to listen to its fans, which was Mass Effect 3, which had an ending that was the first iteration of the ending was, and I haven't played it because I only played Mass Effect 3 after it gotten patched and we had an extended ending. But supposedly the first iteration of the ending was so disappointing that people just clamored. There were even lawsuits. There was one fan suing the company because he thought that through marketing campaigns and hype and bullshit, he'd been led to believe that decisions he made through Mass Effect 1 and 2 and then 3 obviously would affect the ending. And what we got ultimately were just three variations of well, not three variations, but three permutations that would alter slightly depending on how many points you got in this battle campaign bullshit. But the studio actually listened. They didn't exactly fix it. They sort of patched it, and they sort of patched it and put up some makeup and opened the mouth of the fuck doll a bit more, but they didn't exactly fix it.
Wasn't it kind of, I haven't played it, but wasn't it kind of all the way up to the end, making all of these moral choices and sacrifices and whatever, and you get to the end and it's like, pick door number 1, 2, or 3 for the ending that you want? It
was pretty much, it was a bit disappointing because...
so it was like the 11th hour.
Yeah, the ending...
Mass Effect is a rapist. No, wait.
Yeah. The ending you got was literally determined by something completely different than what you'd been led to believe it would be determined.
Well, that is a kick in the teeth.
It is very much a kick in the teeth because I would say that Mass Effect are not adventure games in any sense, but they are among the AAA games who actually do adventure great. Mass Effect has great fucking dialogue, and it has great fucking dialogue trees.
And I suppose going by our age-old discussion about what makes an adventure game and what doesn't, one of the main criteria for that is, of course, an unfolding story that you can actually pay attention to. Of course, there are all the game mechanics and all of that, not touching that one. But from what I've read about Mass Effect, it does have a kinship with adventure games in the sense that it actually tells an unfolding story that branches and has you have a clear impact on the story, and there are clear consequences for your choices.
Absolutely.
And then it kicks you in the nuts at the end, apparently. But
that was really sad because the story was always fucking great. I mean, Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 are fantastic as far as storytelling goes. And I'll say this to any adventure fan listening. Hopefully, everyone listening at this moment, or everyone literally, because there might just be one.
We have 2 viewers.
Even if every 2. Even if you're, even if you're just old school adventure fans, play them if you haven't. They're brilliant stories. Absolutely.
I just can't finger my way through that.
And that just makes my heart all warm and fuzzy. That people would actually make a game these days where you can really get invested in the story. I think that's brilliant.
Play Gone Home. All right.
I'm gonna play Gone. I may have missed it on the Steam sale, but
that's a pity because one drawback with that game is it's fucking a game that will take you. It took me 4 hours, but I really got into it, so I really wanted to see everything, and I didn't. But I think it's like $20 or something if you want to buy it on full price for a game that's for a game that's over in about 2 or 3 hours for a normal player. That's a bit steep, but I got it for $5, so fuck it.
I'm not sure if I've missed it, by the way. It may still be on sale. I'll make a note to check it out after this.
Please do. Tissues, man, tissues.
But where did we? Tissues.
Yeah, all right.
Where did we get to?
We got to where game companies actually listen to their customers, which is one of the strengths I thought about. One of the differences of what I said. Between what I said about game companies, AAA companies not listening to their audience, it may be a gross generalization, to crowdfunded indie games is that, of course, what they can use this for is that if they're crowdfunding a game, that means the game is not actually done yet. and the crowd will still have some influence on the game that is currently being developed. And one of the great things I think crowdfunding does is it gives an insight into just what kind of hellish nightmare game development can be. We've seen it ourselves with Space Venture, which was successfully kickstarted in 2012, and it's still not out. And it turns out that game development is really an awfully long and expensive endeavor to embark on, and a lot of people who were crowdfunding early adventure games didn't really realize that you can't actually make a game for, what was it, 200,000 or 400,000.
I think
Space Venture funded for 500,000.
Yeah, Space Venture aimed for 500,000, and they got a tiny bit more, but with pledgers who ultimately have cards with no coverage and stuff, you're bound to be at least a few $100, if not a few $1,000 short of the goal you want to make.
Oh, absolutely. But Space Venture was delayed for a long time because of problems with the programming department, and you can't.
And I still feel I do feel a little bad for ragging on people who've complained about that, because we're kind of privy, because obviously and Scott and Mark are great personal friends of ours, friends that I value a lot personally to have in my life. So we're able to ask them questions that you won't necessarily find the answers for anywhere else. And if there is something to be said for crowdfunding, then it demands insane things of you PR-wise. It demands you to really be in touch with people, and Space Venture hasn't been able to fulfill in that obligation, probably because their PR man, Chris Pope, has had to take over a bunch of coding duties. So he's actually busy working on the fucking game, which I appreciate. I can live with being kept in the dark for a while, but other people certainly can't. So there is a line to walk.
There's
one project that really fucking misfired, and we can talk about this because it's been a while. Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded had the leader of that project, Paul Trobe, pull off a bunch of unethical stuff. I'm not going to get too far into it, but among the things he did was he impersonated one of the writers of that game, Josh Mandel. In writing updates, Paul Trow would write an update as Josh Mandel. Of course, when Josh found out, he had a shit fit, justifiably so. But I can, putting myself into Paul's shoes, which is not a very nice thing to do, I can sort of understand why you would prefer to get some kind of reliable word out there instead of just having people kept in the dark. Why he didn't just write it as himself, I will never get. It was a fucking low thing to do. But
he did it for an entirely different reason. But you're absolutely right. Transparency and openness is a very valuable thing, and a very it's alpha and omega with crowdfunding.
It is. And that project was really an example of how much you can misfire. I mean, because in that guy's head, he had this idea that he was being open and transparent and honest, whereas he was just a fucking prick. I mean, we're not getting into this because we have no budget.
No, but still, if AAA companies start using crowdfunding on crowdfunding's terms, and those terms are in my head at this moment, but that's the thing about listening to your audience and being open and forthcoming and letting them have some influence over the material that you're putting out, then I suppose that's one of the benefits of crowdfunding. I mean,
this is where the political aspect comes in, and
because I was going to get to the con, and the con is, again, I feel they take unnecessary focus away from those people who are really struggling to make it. These people can make it. I mean, they don't have to sell their house or move their shit into the garage or whatever to make it. Quest for Infamy had to make it on a ridiculously low budget. and all of these people sort of get buried in the mire of hey, we got a game coming out, we're announcing it on E3, there's a Kickstarter campaign, we don't really need it, we just want to, we just want pats on the back from you guys that we're actually making this game that you like. Or my boss asked me to see if there actually was an audience for this game or if there wasn't, so I'm going to go and Kickstarter.
This is kind of true, this is probably what puts us apart, and that's why I brought up the whole we're both leftist things, because I think I'm a tad more liberal than you are, in the sense that I believe enough in a free market to say that, well, if people want Quest for Infamy, they'll put their money on Quest for Infamy. If they want Shenmue 3, you can't stop them from putting money on it, and but it is true that the latter has quite a bunch of what you would say would be unfair advantages. It is not a pure crowdfunding campaign, in the sense that not all of their budget comes from crowdfunding.
Oh no, and it doesn't. And honestly, I'm not saying that it should, because there are plenty of instances where someone has crowdfunded a brilliant piece of shit, and they crowdfunded 50% of it, and some investment capitalists went in and funded the other 50%.
Yeah, what we've got on our own home court is we've got Phoenix, who, as far as I remember, Quest for Infamy was kickstarted successfully, and then only then did Infamous Quest land. Infamous Quests. There are more of them. Only then did they land a publishing deal with Phoenix. So it does happen in the indie community too. And I do think we also, apart from the whole free market thing, we also kind of disagree on it. I admire your spirit in that you seem to think that every indie is a good guy. 2 words: Phil Fish.
Oh no, never said that. Never said that.
Not every AAA is an asshole, and not every indie is a great guy. But there is. You must also admit that there is a certain level of irony in the fact that some of the crowdfunding projects that we have been most involved in are actually by people that you would say were part of the AAA industry of those days. It wasn't labeled as such, but back in the 90s, if anything was AAA, that was Sierra. So we're rooting for a bunch of indies who came from that.
But also we're not, because we've got Steven Alexander and Agustin Cordes and all of these people. And also, no, I would never. You're probably right that you're a bit more liberal than I am, and I'm more of a naive idealist. I will certainly take that on. But my favorite movie scene ever is the end of Fight Club, when all the financial buildings just crumble to the ground and everyone has to start from scratch.
Yeah.
I would never go so far as to say all indie companies are the good guys, all AAA companies are the bad guys. Never would. The difference is that, as you said, if people want to put their money on Infamous Quests, they'll do that. If they want to put their money on Shenmue 3, that's their prerogative. That's what they should do. Fine, I will accept that, and I do accept that. Problem is, if you have so much attention spotlights blaring on Shenmue 3, Infamous Quests have to work much, much harder with a much, much smaller budget. They don't have an army of PR guys who can set up booths at E3 to get people to know that there is a thing called Infamous Quests.
I don't necessarily think that's true. It's true that if you treat all gamers like sheep, basically, who'll just flock, or flies or moth who'll flock towards the biggest light. I don't necessarily think that's true. I mean, do consider the fact that I know you were out of it for a couple of years, but I stuck around for a few years longer. But man,
we're talking about the Space Quest days, dear listeners.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not talking that I just went into a coma or anything.
I started out in 2002 in the Space Quest community, the Subspace channel, and I stuck around till at least 2007, 2008, possibly. There are some of my last posts are in reference of not being around much longer because I had a girlfriend, and that was like a 7-year relationship. So that kind of puts it into perspective.
Today I learned girlfriends kill your forum presence.
Yeah, girlfriends kill your forum presence. And now my forum presence is better than ever. But please do consider for a moment that there will always be those of us who will worship the niche thing. You know, we're you know, certainly I'm attracted by the big light and the fact that, hell, I play AAA games. I play AAA games if they interest me. But what you're saying,
like you said, we played AAA games in the 90s. They were, Sierra and LucasArts were AAA at that
But what you're saying is that no one will stick around, you know, stick up for the indies. I think you're kind of imagine that. Well, imagine there's a great figure of this somewhere. You know, you've got a circle over here and you've got a circle over here, and they do kind of overlap, but not so much. This over here is a AAA crowd, and this over here is the infamous Quest crowd. I don't necessarily think they overlap to the extent that you suggest, where there would be a real danger of them, you know, disrupting the other one's project.
No. Okay, fine. Let me draw you two circles. This one is where I am, and this one way over here in the fucking corner is where you are. You completely misunderstood my points.
That is such an easy fucking cop out.
No.
Clearly, you misunderstood my point.
No, but you're putting words into my mouth, saying that you know, I somehow feel that you know, indie niche gamers
words into your mouth.
Yeah, all right. You know, because I don't feel that you know, indie gamers and AAA gamers, if there ever was such a distinction, there of course isn't. We're all just in the same boat together. We just have different preferences. All I'm saying is there are people with lots of budget, you know, spreadsheets that are doing very, very well, and then there are the people who keep putting out shit, quality shit, who are constantly in the red because they don't have the same marketing budget as the big guys do. And that's
the problem is that, you know, the problem is that,
and here's my point with that. The balance that was supposed to adjust for that was crowdfunding, because that took away the publishing power of the biggies and gave a voice to the tiny indies, who were then able to snowball attention outwards and onwards and ever upwards. And now the biggie crowd is sort of usurping that sphere, because there have been tons of indie projects that I've never heard of that I would have loved to have backed if I'd known where they were. But everyone was talking about this other project on social media. We're complicit in this, of course, because once a thing like Shenmue 3 hits, we start tweeting like mad about it, and so the entire conversation gets cluttered up with, oh my God, they're crowdfunding Shenmue 3. Yeah, but what about this other thing? Never mind. We'll get to that in a second.
Well, this very much sparks another discussion, which is not too relevant, but you know, as you'll know, it's certainly become a discussion with the general elections over here. You know, is the media the bad guy? Is the media skewing our focus away from what's important over here to this over here, which sells more newspapers and generates more hits?
Good point. Back in my good graces, man.
I don't necessarily think that infamous quests have been struggling to a point where they would say that
didn't say infamous.
3. Well, Infamous is a great example, because Infamous have been doing this retro thing, and people have been favorably comparing them with Sierra. So let's grab a hold of those guys, because I think they fit the parable that we're making pretty well. So they're kind of an easy subject for this. You know, Infamous versus Shenmue 3. You know, never mind the fact that these Kickstarters launched at completely different points in time.
And they're completely different games.
I don't actually think that a company like Infamous has been struggling. You know, first and foremost, they have a crowd. There is a huge fucking demand for 90s style point-and-click adventures. This is not negligible, and I don't necessarily think there is an overlap in that. You know, people who want point-and-click of 90s style are not going to settle for something with 3D animation. You know, the other way around. Shenmue looks completely different from this sort of game over here. So I don't think there is that great of an overlap.
Oh no. And
so first of all, you have a big crowd dedicated to the niche. You also have a game that is, even if game development is expensive, cheaper to make. It is cheaper to do a piece of 2D animation rather than 3D, especially considering that in the AAA business is where you find craftsmen. people who are educated. They make their living on this. You know, and you know, I would know this because I worked on a fan game for 9 fucking years. But over on the other, you know, in the other camp, you have people who are very passionate and they don't mind working pro bono. They just want to see their efforts go into a game. So ultimately, you do have a game on the other side of the duck pond that is cheaper to make, and you have a crowd that would back such a game in a heartbeat. You know, in a sense, I think the AAA developers may have greater marketing resources at their disposal, but they also kind of fight harder because they're trying to reach for Joe Average. They're trying to get the average gamer, your average YouTuber roped into this thing, whereas Infamous know their target audience well, and they can capitalize on that.
All right, I'll give you that. If we're going by the specific example of Shenmue 3 versus Infamous Quests, of course you have a point on that. I would very, very much like to abstract this conversation a bit, which you almost
it's easy to latch onto examples that are easy for us to understand. But of course, my argument would be completely different. You know, I'm taking the easy way out. I'm not going for Charles Dexter Ward, which is still incomprehensible to me.
Yeah, right. But the problem with comparing Shenmue 3 and what Infamous Quests are doing is that it's apples and oranges. There may be some overlap, but Shenmue is fundamentally a QTE action role-playing kind of thing, and the other thing is a completely pixel art, harking back to the old days retro style. I'm sorry, Steven, but it is retro style.
But when you rally against AAA crowdfunding, you know, and rally against not being negative, because I very much admire the heart you put into this. But when you do rally against it, do you also think that the overlap might be greater? I mean, do you actually think that Infamous and Shenmue will at one point fight for the same customer base?
No, I don't. My problem with this is fundamentally ideological, which is why I wanted to abstract the conversation. Right. What I'm concerned about is I'm not going to say integrity, and I'm not going to say I'm not going to put on a protest march and physically rally against it. I am going to rail like a little bitch against it, because much in the same way as much in the same way that punk rock record labels became mainstream once they sold 1 million copies and started making executive decisions and such. Much the same way I think Kickstarter and all the other crowdfunding platforms are going to start, because if a game funds on Kickstarter, that means 5% for Kickstarter. If they have popular games on their roster for people to fund, then they're more liable to put those in the front, in the spotlight. And right. I just have this idiotic kind of mental image of these hollow people in suits, like just imagine a walking suit, no face whatsoever.
Right. The Wish You Were Here cover.
Yeah, exactly. Just sitting down and having a little strokey beard meeting and going, right, well, because they do treat their customers like sheep. I'm dead serious. The marketing division of any games company is by far the evilest. It's not even the return.
That also, of course, that also goes about Sierra of yore. But,
yes, it does.
But it goes for any kind of marketing. Marketing is inherently cynical because you have to get the non-believers to believe in your thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and that is, that is what I think fundamentally goes against the spirit of crowdfunding, which was, I am not here to sell this idea to you. And parentheses, I know that a Kickstarter campaign is fundamentally built around, and a Kickstarter video is fundamentally built to sell you on the idea. But it's not in the same way as taking out a machine ad that says so and so is going to make you his bitch. Which is the most cynical piece of marketing ploy that he, by the way, had nothing to do with. So good on you, Mr. Romero. It's the most that's the most cynical kind of advertisement. And Kickstarter is not supposed to be advertisement. It's not supposed to be a focus group replacement. It's supposed to be a free community where, as you say, where the zeitgeist can take hold and where people can express free ideas and they can get themselves involved in projects. And I just don't see. I mean, benefit of the doubt and all that, but I just don't see AAA marketing divisions who probably suggested this thing to the Shenmue 3 creator in the first place. Ethics citation needed. I just don't see them taking this seriously in that same regard. They see it as just another way of connecting with the people below. Those people that we look out at fancy office windows and see milling about the street like ants. We shall connect with these in some fashion. Fuck you, people.
Peasants.
The commoners.
Yeah.
Where's Gareth with his British accent?
I don't know. I am Martin Guerre.
From the Build-A-Bear group?
Yeah, from the Build-A-Bear group. It's not that I disagree, but I think I'm more willing to give AAA games the benefit of the doubt more than you, because not everyone is Electronic Arts. There are AAA companies out there who pour love into their games, and it shows. One of the best, most emotionally engaging games that I played was a PlayStation exclusive game by someone called That Game Company, and they received a shitload of funding from Sony to make a game called Journey, which is, I dare say, the only game to actually have made me cry. It actually struck a chord with me to a point where I was, sitting with my controller playing it with tears running down my cheeks.
Play Gone Home.
Yeah, I'll well,
sorry,
if I ever want to kill myself, I'll play Gone Home, with, crying, depression.
Which is good, because you only really need one arm on the mountain.
By and large, I do know the guys who developed it weren't AAA, but they certainly had a AAA budget, and they made the greatest fucking game with that. And I'm kind of altruistic in that regard. First and foremost, gaming is about having fun. And if people do get to vote with their wallets, even in the situations where there is kind of an unfair advantage as far as the marketing goes, it'll get noticed. If the AAA companies get a boost by successfully using crowdfunding, they will take an equivalent hit if they do unsuccessful crowdfunding. If people are being shat on, then they will vote with their wallets in that direction as well.
I totally see what you're saying, and I will also play devil's advocate in the argument of so when is a company too big to crowdfund? I mean, it's I don't think that there are any cynical game developers, even I suppose at EA. I mean, everyone has a dream of making a valid contribution to whatever field they're in, but
But it's interesting that you it's interesting that you should bring up punk rock, because we think about bands like Sex Pistols as being very self-made, whereas they wasn't. Sex Pistols was a boy band. Malcolm McLaren totally knew what he was going for, and he put all these people together and he gave them an image, and it worked. It sparked an entire music scene. But it wouldn't be any, it wouldn't be any different from Backstreet Boys sparking an entire music scene. It was the same fucking thing. The Beatles, as we know them, were a boy band. I mean, they certainly from 50.
At least they knew each other from childhood. I mean,
certainly from 57 to 62, they were the real deal. But once Brian Epstein got on board and decided that they were going to switch their leather for suits, then it became a more coordinated venture.
All right. We're also getting into a different discussion, which I wasn't going to touch when we were talking about the of the 90s.
It's a discussion about principle. It's a discussion about principle in the entertainment industry. So I think you can apply it as a parallel. Certainly, we're not going to go full gear towards that discussion, but I think it enters relatively naturally.
It does. You're absolutely right, and it does bring up. It brings up a word that I wasn't going to use, but I'm going to now anyway, which was integrity in it. And
I thought you were going to go for ethics.
Yeah, probably should have. That's another thing. No, but let's just say way to ruin my punk rock memories, by the way. But let's just say that because what I really want to get out of any game that I play, be it from a AAA standpoint or from a small indie crowdfunded statement, is some sort of integrity and honesty, and fair enough, you can get that from either side of them. Another thing you brought up was this kind of temporal discontinuity, which is that AAA companies of today are not the same as the AAA companies of the 90s. They did have.
I don't exactly disagree. I don't exactly agree on that. It's just that we haven't heard the negative stories. Whereas today, and you mentioned it yourself, social media, the net, there is a much bigger platform in which rumors can spread, in which the negative stories can permutate. The stuff I've heard from, and I won't say any of it because it has transpired during private conversations. But the stuff I've heard about Sierra back in the day, shit, your memories wouldn't be the same. My memories aren't the same, and you're probably aware of some of those stories as well. And I'm not gonna bring up stuff that was disclosed to me in private conversations, but
it'll come out at some point.
AAA of back then may not technologically have been the same as AAA of today, but the amount of cynicism is exactly the same, unchanged.
Fine. You're absolutely right about that. Can we at least agree that fuck? What was my point again? Yeah.
I don't think this is about us. I don't. Yeah, we might be able to agree on something, but I think this episode is all about we're making our viewpoints clear, and people can hopefully listen to this and make up their own mind. I don't want to put any thoughts into people's minds. So, we might not necessarily wind up agreeing, but it's been a great discussion regardless.
Thank you. Likewise, sir. And I think our IRC channel has been uncharacteristically quiet.
Well, people are listening. The last words on there were that semen burping gutter slug. Then a correction to slut. But actually, I think semen burping gutter slug sounds even better.
That's actually much better. But okay, can we? Mine stopped around Billy Bob saying I'm a Renaissance man. Apparently, my IRC thing is bored then. Yeah. But okay, can we then? Can we agree that I had it just a second ago. Transparency and honesty within game development is one of the benefits that global communication at a faster speed, social media, and by extension of social media, then crowdfunding. Before we could talk to our favorite game designers. Now we can talk and partake in the development of their game. Yeah. All of that is an excellent evolution that should not be, and I'm not saying it is being, but I'm scared to think of what might happen in the future. But it should not be sullied by cynical cooperative mass market treating people like sheep mentalities.
I agree on the first point that you made, in that what you're mentioning is indeed a great development. It is, but I do think it's the prerogative of any artist to keep their work in a black box. I think it is the prerogative of anyone who creates a work of art, which I ultimately think games are. Never mind if it's Batman Arkham Knight or Assassin's Creed or it's Space Venture. I think it's the prerogative of anyone who sets out to create something that should entertain other people that we're going to stay a bit off the radar with this. We're not going to spoil it. We have a great fucking idea. We have great fucking technology and we know it. We have confidence in how this is going to play out. And I do know most AAA stories don't end with that. That is true. There is an argument to be made there. But I don't necessarily think that transparency is the alpha and omega of game development. Certainly many of the games we worship were created without any kind of transparency. They were black boxes. So again, and that's why I started bringing up Shenmue versus Infamous Quests. In my opinion, it depends on the story you're trying to tell. It depends on what game you're trying to make. But certainly, it is in my opinion, it is a great development. What you're mentioning, certainly.
Okay, thank you. But what transparency also brings with it is that some of those games that we grew up loving as kids were could in fact have been entirely different had they not been subject to internal black box kind of meddling. Space Quest 4 was supposed to have been a parser game. Full Throttle was supposed to have been ports.
We've talked about how King's Quest 5 had so much potential, but wound up being totally shit.
Yeah. So there is something to be said for artists who wants to keep to themselves and not really come out of the closet until their stuff is done. I can totally sympathize with that, but I do not want to see game companies and publishers and someone has to be out there saying, yeah, something is still happening, and we will tease you with little tidbits. We're not going to give the entire thing away. The whole locking yourself in a cupboard until the game is done kind of business, which I know some of our close developer friends are actually kind of very. It's a mode of operation they're kind of happy with, but the climate has changed, and if you're a participant in the whole creative process, the artistry process, as you very very correctly categorize it as, developing a game is a form of art.
Well, clearly I do love your idealism. But I'm kind of I'm looking over at my Laserdisc collection right now, and I immediately think that, well, if Disney decides to put out the original theatrical versions of the original Star Wars trilogy on Blu-ray, that's going to be against the wishes of the auteur of those works, George Lucas. Ridley Scott has made shit decisions in his most recent movies, and these guys are getting away with it because they're artists. George Lucas has certainly received a bunch of shit for what he's done, but he's received a bunch of shit by a very passionate community of people who argue for the releases of the original versions of his films. I can't really find a game world parallel, and that's why I'm eschewing that we're talking about games and moving on to these different genres. But certainly you could argue that while I also prefer to put trust into the auteur, there are cases where different sets of eyes might be beneficial.
Oh, right, yeah.
Would Space Quest 4 have worked as a parser game? It might have. I'm willing to put my faith into Mark and Scott and say that it might have. There is also the distinct possibility that it wouldn't have.
I would, okay, going back to the movie example, these are two examples of people who are just, especially the George Lucas example, a dude who's just gone off the rails, countered with the many, countless times I can think of a good movie that could have been so much better if the studio had just kept their fucking hands off of it. And I am confident that the only reason we know more about those than we do about computer games is the fact that these were, first of all, created by people who were under contracts way ago, and they can now talk about it. The studios have stopped giving a shit because they're still putting things out. And also, the audience just wasn't as big for computer games. I'm sure that in 20 years or something, we'll be hearing about how, The Last of Us and The Walking Dead, those designers are going to come out and say, yeah, well, we actually had all of these great ideas we wanted to put in, but then someone told us, nah, just add another zombie, that'll be fine. Right. Should we cap off this discussion? Because I think you made some very, very good points, some things that I really have to consider about just how far my idealism can stretch.
As did you, certainly. Yeah, I think it's been enjoyable. It has been a long-winded discussion, and I was never expecting us to walk away with a consensus on this.
Nah, and I don't think we're going to get one.
Probably not, but let me say that I do admire your very idealistic stance on this, and I certainly don't think that you're wrong by any means. It's just that I don't necessarily agree with it.
Nah, it's cool. I just want to see the entire financial world burn and crumble to the ground, and everyone start over with sticks. And you seem to have a more nuanced perspective on the whole thing. So
I try. I may be completely in the wrong, but we'll see what happens.
Of course you are.
Yeah, if Shenmue 4 pops around on Kickstarter in a couple of weeks, then we know who's right. And it certainly isn't me.
Oh yeah, of course. So anyway, if you guys who are watching and or listening have any things that we need to bring up in this discussion, please drop us a line at any way you can. We are at BS Designers on Twitter. Just go nuts. You can jump by our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/backseat designers. You can even leave us, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can even just leave us a comment. And if you're not, you can watch the video of this at youtube.com/backseat designers. And because we're such hypocritical bastards, we actually do have a crowdfunding thing of our own.
Yeah, and we had a stretch goal for this episode, which hasn't been met, which was that if we received a pledge of $500, we were going to do this thing au natural. Or certainly I was. I don't know about you, but I was going to, I probably wasn't going to pan the camera down there, but I totally could have done it. We haven't received.
Fuck, I could do that. No, I don't give a shit about the 500.
I give a shit about the 500.
Yeah, you do now.
Yeah, but yeah, we could totally have done that. Why don't you give us money? So yeah, go to patreon.com/backseatdesigners and heap your money on us and be filled with the wonderful feeling of instant regret. And on that note, we're gonna thank one of our patrons who is currently pledging $8 a month, and for that we are eternally contractually obliged to thank him at the end of every episode. And his company has been quite the focal point of this one episode, Mr. Steven Alexander of Infamous Quests.
Yay! And honestly,
we send you 3 Kickstarter, sir. Thank you for the help, Steven.
Yes, and we honestly didn't mean to make you like the poster boy for indie development. It just kind of grew naturally out of, let's say, Fred's mind.
I totally wanted to make him the scapegoat. Next month, I'm sending him a jar of Marmite.
Alrighty then. So yeah. Oh, and the last thing is, of course, you can subscribe to the show on whatever the hell you want. Just head over to backseatdesigners.podbean.com and get busy and funky on your listening devices.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, baby.
Thank
you very much, my esteemed compatriot, for taking the time to talk about this. This is the second to last episode we're doing, because next time we're on the air, we're not going to be on the air next week because I've got another festival to go to and another shit-faced marathon to get through. But we are gearing up for our season finale, which was such a rousing success last season that we decided to do something similar again.
Yeah, and we can't really disclose who we're going to bring on as guests, because this is going to be one of those guest-laden affairs where we sit down in kind of a round table situation and we talk about the subjects we've covered so far. But we have some pretty cool people lined up, and I hope that it will work out. In any case, it's going to be a blast.
Yes. So I do hope, if nothing else, if we've been boring you for these past 11 episodes, is it? At least we hope you'll tune in.
12, so the past 11 would cover it, Now the past 12. If you've sat through this and you are bored, then make it 12.
All right, so the past 12. So if we've been boring your pants off, just the two of us talking, and thanks to our guest thing from Gareth, obviously. But if he was boring as well, please do tune into the season finale, because there will be esteemed people who are not boring.
Yeah, and there will be us who are.
And we will, of course, also be there, but you'll have to endure that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I gotta say. Thanks for having this discussion. For once, I didn't feel like I somehow roped you and got the upper hand or anything like that. I think
that was a pretty good discussion.
I've got some things to think about.
Yeah. So thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. We'll see you guys. Bye.
No more for today.